The night air was cool as Peter Reynolds fixed his expensive tie and checked his watch. It was just past 11 p.m. on a busy Friday in downtown. The 42-year-old financial analyst had already spent 2 hours at Murphy's Bar, where he downed 4 whiskeys and snapped at the bartender for being too slow. Now he walked with the confident swagger of someone who believed money could open any door. The Meridian nightclub stood before him, its blue lights washing over the street and the line of people waiting to get in. Bass from the music inside thumped through the walls. Peter had never waited in a line before and wasn't about to start tonight. "Those people have been waiting for almost an hour," his friend Tom warned, trailing behind. But Peter ignored him, marching straight to the front. The doorman stood like a mountain, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark skin and clear eyes that missed nothing. His name tag read David. Despite the chilly evening, David wore only the club's black uniform shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing muscular forearms. His face remained calm and professional as Peter approached. "Evening, sir," David said, his voice deep but gentle. "I'm afraid we're at capacity right now. There will be some space in about 20 minutes if you'd like to join the line." Peter blinked, not understanding the words at first. Someone was telling him no. He looked past David at the club entrance where 2 women were being allowed in. "You're letting them in," Peter pointed, his words slightly slurred. David nodded. "They have reservations, sir." "Do you know who I am?" Peter stepped closer, the smell of alcohol heavy on his breath. "I spend more in one night than these people make in a month." The doorman didn't flinch. "I understand, sir, but tonight every guest follows the same rules." "I'd be happy to." "Rules?" Peter laughed, but there was no humor in it. His face grew red in the blue light of the club's sign. "Rules are for people who can't afford to break them." The people in line began to watch. Some pulled out their phones. Tom tugged at Peter's sleeve, whispering, "Let's just go somewhere else, man." But Peter couldn't let it go. Something in David's calm expression made his blood boil. Who was this doorman to deny him anything? In Peter's mind, the alcohol twisted his thoughts, making the rejection feel personal, an attack on everything he believed about himself. "I've gotten into every club in this city," Peter said, his voice getting louder. "Every single one." "I'm sure you have, sir," David replied evenly. "And you're welcome here too, just as soon as we have space." A younger couple was now being allowed in. The woman glanced nervously at Peter as they passed. David held the door open for them with a friendly nod. "Them? You're letting them in?" Peter's voice cracked with anger. "They'd been waiting in line for 45 minutes, David explained patiently. "If you'd like to join." "I'm not waiting in any line," Peter shouted. People nearby fell silent, watching the scene unfold. "You think I can't see what's happening here?" Tom tried once more to pull his friend away. "Peter, come on. You're making a scene." But Peter was beyond listening. The rejection, the alcohol, and something darker inside him formed a dangerous mixture. His hands balled into fists as he stared at the doorman, who still hadn't raised his voice or changed his expression. In that moment, something ugly was building inside Peter Reynolds, something that would change lives forever. The tension in Peter's body was visible to everyone watching. His expensive suit couldn't hide the way his shoulders hunched forward like an animal ready to attack. The line of waiting people had gone quiet, watching the drama unfold under the blue lights of the Meridian. "You're making a big mistake," Peter said, pulling out his wallet. He yanked out several $100 bills and held them toward David. "This should help you find some space inside." David didn't even look at the money. "I'm sorry, sir, but that's not how we operate here." A few people in line whispered to each other. Someone laughed quietly. Peter's head snapped toward the sound, his face growing even redder. "What are you all looking at?" he shouted at the line. "Never seen real money before?" Tom stepped between Peter and the crowd. "Pete, let's just go. There are other clubs." But Peter shoved his friend aside. The money was still clutched in his hand as he turned back to David. "Everyone has a price. What's yours?" "Sir, I'm just doing my job," David replied calmly. "If you'd like to wait, your job?" Peter laughed bitterly. "Your job is to keep the wrong people out and let the right people in." He gestured to himself. "I'm the right people." A young couple emerged from the club, creating a small space inside. David nodded to the next group in line. 4 friends who had been waiting patiently for nearly an hour. "They can go in, but not me." Peter's voice rose over the music spilling from the open door. "Look at me. Look at what I'm wearing. This suit costs more than you make in a month." One of the 4 friends passing by muttered, "Money doesn't buy class, man." Peter spun around, but the group had already slipped inside. The door closed. The bass from the music became muffled again. David remained as steady as a rock, his expression professional despite the abuse. "Sir, I need to ask you to step aside for other guests or join the line." "Other guests?" Peter spat the words. "You mean these people?" He waved his hand dismissively at the line. "They're nobody." "I'm somebody. Google me." Tom tried once more. "Peter, you're embarrassing yourself. Let's go get some food and sober up." The mention of sobering up only enraged Peter more. "I'm not drunk," he shouted, though he swayed slightly on his feet. He turned back to David, jabbing a finger toward his chest, but not quite touching him. "You don't know who you're messing with. I'm friends with the owner." "If you're friends with Mr. Chen, you're welcome to call him," David suggested reasonably, not rising to the bait. The mention of the owner's actual name deflated Peter for just a moment. He clearly had no idea who owned the club. But rather than back down, he doubled down. "I don't need to prove anything to you," Peter hissed, stepping closer to David. "You're just the help. You're just the guy who opens doors for your betters." Several people in line had their phones out now, recording the scene. Peter didn't notice or didn't care. His world had narrowed to this one man who dared tell him no. "Last time, I'll say this nicely," David said, his voice finally firming up though he remained professional. "Please step aside or join the line." Peter's eyes narrowed. Something dark crossed his face, a look that Tom had seen before and knew meant trouble. In the blue light of the club's sign, with witnesses all around and phones recording, Peter Reynolds was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "You have no idea who I am," Peter said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "But you're about to find out." The air around them seemed to crackle with tension. Tom could feel that his friend was about to do something stupid, something that couldn't be taken back. He made one last desperate attempt. "Peter, I'm calling an Uber. We're leaving. Now." He grabbed Peter's arm firmly. Peter yanked away with surprising strength. "Get your hands off me." His voice had taken on a new quality, no longer just angry but filled with a kind of hate that made the people nearby step back. He turned to David again, his eyes wild. "You think you're better than me, standing there all high and mighty." David remained still, his hands clasped in front of him, the picture of professionalism. "Sir, I'm just doing my job. There's no need for this to get personal." But personal was exactly where Peter wanted to take it. The alcohol in his system had stripped away whatever filters he normally kept in place. Words began pouring out of him, terrible words, words that made the crowd gasp. He started hurling racial slurs at David, each one more vicious than the last. People in line looked at each other in shock. A woman near the front covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Is this really happening?" Through it all, David didn't move. His expression remained neutral, though something flickered in his eyes, not fear, but something deeper, like he was storing away each word, each moment. "You should be thanking me for even talking to you," Peter continued, his runt building steam. He began making crude gestures, mockingly imitating what he thought David sounded like. 2 security guards from inside the club noticed what was happening and began moving toward the door. David saw them and subtly raised his hand, a signal for them to wait. Tom was frantically texting on his phone, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Peter, our ride is here. We need to go now." But Peter wasn't finished. He poked his finger into David's chest. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." David's eyes met Peter's, calm brown eyes looking into bloodshot blue ones. "I hear you, sir," David said quietly. "And I think you've had enough for tonight." Something about David's calmness made Peter snap completely, his face contorted with rage. "Don't you tell me when I've had enough," he screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. And then he did it, the unthinkable thing that would soon be viewed by millions online. Peter Reynolds, financial analyst, graduate of an elite university, member of 3 exclusive clubs, father of a college freshman, gathered all the saliva he could muster and spat directly into David's face. The crowd gasped in unison. Time seemed to freeze. The security guards started forward, but again David raised his hand slightly, stopping them. With deliberate slowness, David took out a handkerchief from his pocket. He wiped his face, folded the cloth neatly, and returned it to his pocket. Not a word, not a change in his breathing. Peter, perhaps shocked by his own action, took a small step back. But then, as if needing to justify what he'd done, he hurled one final slur, the worst one yet. The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the music inside the club seemed to have quieted. All eyes were on David, waiting for his response. "Someone called the police," a voice from the line finally said. "Already did," another answered. Tom grabbed Peter's arm again. "We're leaving right now. You've lost your mind." But David spoke before they could move. His voice was quiet but carried clearly in the tense silence. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, using Peter's name for the first time. "I believe we've met before." Peter squinted at him, confusion momentarily replacing his rage. "What are you talking about? I've never seen you before in my life." David smiled slightly, a smile tinged with sadness. "Actually, you have. Just not here." He paused, the blue light of the club sign illuminating his face. "Not in this uniform." Peter stared at David with confusion in his eyes. The alcohol in his system made his thoughts move slowly, like wading through mud. He squinted, trying to place the face that suddenly seemed vaguely familiar. "What are you talking about?" Peter demanded, but his voice had lost some of its edge. David straightened his posture slightly. The change was subtle, but suddenly he looked different, not just a doorman anymore, but someone else entirely. Someone with authority. "Last November," David said calmly. "Boston General Hospital. Your daughter, Lily." Peter's face went completely white. It was as if someone had pulled a plug and drained all the anger from him in an instant. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The crowd watched in confused silence. The blue light from the club sign washed over the scene like they were all underwater. "You? What?" Peter finally managed to say. "Room 4, emergency surgery," David continued. His voice was gentle now, not accusing. "Lily was in a car accident. She was brought in around 8:30 p.m. with internal bleeding and a punctured lung." Tom looked between the two men, completely lost. "Peter, what's he talking about?" But Peter couldn't answer. His hand reached out to steady himself against the wall of the building. His legs suddenly seemed unable to support him. You're Dr. Wilson," Peter whispered. David nodded once. "Yes, Mr. Reynolds, I'm Dr. David Wilson. I was the surgeon who operated on your daughter that night." A woman in the crowd gasped. Someone whispered, "Holy shit." Peter's mind raced back to that terrible night. The phone call that every parent dreads. The frantic drive to the hospital. The hours of waiting, not knowing if his only child would survive. I don't understand," Peter stammered. "You're a doctor. Why are you working as a doorman?" David, Dr. Wilson, smiled slightly. "I work here 2 nights a week. I have for years." "But why?" someone from the crowd asked, now fully invested in this unexpected turn. Dr. Wilson glanced at the person who asked, then back to Peter. "I run a free clinic in Riverdale, the neighborhood where I grew up. This job helps fund the supplies we need that insurance doesn't cover." Peter's memories of that night were coming back in painful flashes. The surgeon had been there, explaining the procedure afterward. But Peter had been so focused on Lily, so racked with fear and relief, that the doctor's face had been just a blur. He remembered a calm voice, steady hands, a reassuring presence, but not the man's features. "Lily had a collapsed lung," Dr. Wilson continued, "and a laceration to her liver. Do you remember?" Peter nodded numbly. You said she was lucky. That if the ambulance had arrived 10 minutes later." "Yes," Dr. Wilson confirmed softly. "It was a close thing." Tom was watching his friend with growing horror as the reality of what Peter had done began to sink in. The crowd was completely silent now, many still recording, but with expressions of shock rather than entertainment. "I didn't recognize you," Peter said weakly. It wasn't an excuse, just a statement of fact. "No reason you should have," Dr. Wilson replied. "We met on the worst night of your life, and I was wearing scrubs, not a club uniform." Peter looked down at his expensive shoes, then at the wadded bills still clutched in his hand, then back at the man he had just assaulted, the man who had saved his daughter's life. The crushing weight of shame made him physically sway. I don't. Peter couldn't find words. Dr. Wilson looked at him steadily. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried to everyone listening. You know, Mr. Reynolds, when your daughter woke up after surgery, the first thing she asked was if everyone else in the other car was okay. Even in pain, barely conscious, her concern was for others. The mention of Lily broke something in Peter. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, everyone could see him clearly, not as the arrogant businessman throwing cash around, but as a father who almost lost his child. She asked about the other car. Peter said quietly. Dr. Wilson nodded. She did. And that's when I knew she would be okay, not just physically, but as a person. A police car pulled up to the curb, its lights painting the scene in alternating red and blue. Two officers approached cautiously, taking in the unusual standoff. One of them, Officer Chen, recognized Dr. Wilson immediately. Everything okay here, doctor? He asked. Several voices from the crowd started explaining at once. Officer Chen held up his hand for quiet and looked at Dr. Wilson expectantly. Just a misunderstanding, Dr. Wilson said calmly. Nothing that requires your attention. Peter looked up in surprise, his red-rimmed eyes wide with disbelief. The officer frowned. We received reports of an assault, sir. Before Dr. Wilson could respond, someone from the crowd called out. He spit in the doctor's face. We all saw it. Several others nodded in agreement. Officer Chen looked at Dr. Wilson with raised eyebrows. Is that true? Dr. Wilson hesitated, then sighed. Yes, it happened. But I don't wish to press charges. A murmur went through the crowd. Tom looked relieved. Peter just stared at the ground. Maybe we could talk over here, doctor, Officer Chen suggested, gesturing away from the crowd. As they stepped aside, Peter finally found his voice again. Why? He called out. Why would you not press charges? After what I did, after what I said. Dr. Wilson turned back to face him. Because I've seen you on the worst night of your life, Mr. Reynolds, and I've seen you tonight. Neither one is the whole story of who you are. The two men spoke privately with the officers for a few minutes. The crowd began to disperse, though many lingered, still recording or whispering among themselves. Tom stood awkwardly to the side, clearly unsure whether to stay with his friend or distance himself from what had happened. When Dr. Wilson returned, he gestured to a bench nearby. Would you sit with me for a moment, Mr. Reynolds? Peter nodded numbly and followed. The officers remained at a distance, watching carefully. That night when I operated on Lily, Dr. Wilson began once they were seated. I had already been at the hospital for 16 hours. He spoke matter-of-factly, without a hint of seeking praise or pity. We were short-staffed. 3 car accidents had come in earlier, plus a building fire in Riverdale. Peter listened, his eyes fixed on Dr. Wilson's face, seeing him clearly for the first time. I was about to go home when they brought Lily in. The on-call surgeon was still in another operation. Dr. Wilson's voice stayed steady. I remember her necklace, a small gold heart. The nurses had to remove it for surgery. You were clutching it in the waiting room. Peter's hand moved unconsciously to his chest, where that same necklace now hung under his shirt. He had worn it every day since the accident. I worked on her for nearly 6 hours, Dr. Wilson continued. When I came out to talk to you afterward, you hugged me. Do you remember that? Peter nodded, tears forming in his eyes. I remember. I couldn't even speak. I just held on to you. That hug meant something to me, Dr. Wilson said. It's why I do what I do, both jobs. The doorman position pays for supplies at our clinic in Riverdale. Bandages, medications, equipment that insurance won't cover. We treat about 50 patients a week there, people who would otherwise go without care. Peter wiped his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. I had no idea. How could you? Dr. Wilson replied. To you, I was just someone standing in your way tonight. Peter flinched at the gentle rebuke. I don't usually, he tried to explain, then stopped himself. No, that's not true. I've acted like this before. Not this bad, but the same attitude. By morning, Peter Reynolds was famous for all the wrong reasons. He woke up with a pounding headache in his empty apartment, memories of the night before crashing back like waves. He reached for his phone and found it buzzing nonstop with notifications. The video had spread everywhere. Someone had posted it around midnight with the title, "Racist Man Spits on Doorman. Turns out he's the doctor who saved his daughter." Within hours, it had jumped from one social media platform to another. By 7 a.m., it had over 2 million views. Peter sat on the edge of his bed, watching himself on the small screen. The footage was clear, his red face, his angry words, the horrible moment when he spat at Dr. Wilson. Then came the revelation, captured perfectly. His shock, his shame, his collapse. The comments below the video were brutal. This is who these people really are when they think no one's watching. Look at his face when he realizes who the doorman is. That doctor deserves a medal for his patience. His phone rang. It was his boss, Richard. "Peter, we need to talk. Have you seen what's online?" "Yes," Peter said quietly. "The board is meeting in an hour. Until then, don't come into the office." The call ended abruptly. Peter sat in the silence of his apartment, the phone heavy in his hand. Then it buzzed with a text. From Lily. "Dad, call me. Please." He couldn't bring himself to dial her number. How could he explain to his daughter what he'd done? How could he tell her about the hate that had poured out of him toward the very man who saved her life? Instead, he opened his laptop and typed Dr. Wilson's name into the search bar. Dozens of new articles appeared, many using screenshots from the video. But all the results showed something else. Articles about Riverdale Free Clinic, about a local doctor working nights as a doorman to fund medical care for those who couldn't afford it. There was a picture of Dr. Wilson in scrubs, standing outside a small brick building with a simple sign, Riverdale Health Center. His smile was the same calm one he'd shown last night, even with Peter's spit dripping down his face. Peter's company sent an email at 11 a.m. It was addressed to all staff but clearly meant for the public. Reynolds Financial wishes to clarify that the views and actions of Peter Reynolds, as seen in the recent viral video, do not reflect our company's values. Mr. Reynolds has been placed on immediate leave while we review this matter internally. By noon, Peter had lost his job. By 1 o'clock, he'd lost his membership at the golf club. By dinner time, he'd received 14 messages from friends who suddenly needed to take a step back. But the worst call came at 7 p.m. Lily, crying so hard she could barely speak. "How could you say those things, Dad? How could you do that to anyone, let alone Dr. Wilson? He's the reason I'm alive." Peter had no answer, no excuse. For the first time in his adult life, he couldn't talk his way out of a problem or throw money at it until it went away. "I don't know who you are anymore," Lily said before hanging up. The words cut deeper than any comment online. That night, Peter sat alone in his living room, the lights off, staring at nothing. His phone had finally stopped buzzing. Everyone who wanted to condemn him had done so. Everyone who wanted to distance themselves had gone. He opened his laptop again and found the website for Riverdale Health Center. There was a donation button. He clicked it, then stared at the amount field for a long time. What was the right number to enter after what he'd done? What could possibly make up for it? In the darkness of his apartment, Peter Reynolds began to understand something that had escaped him his entire life. Some things couldn't be fixed with money. Some wounds couldn't be healed with a check. For the first time since he was a child, Peter Reynolds cried, not for himself, not for what he'd lost, but for who he had become without even realizing it. 3 weeks passed. The video had become old news, replaced by newer scandals and outrages. But for Peter Reynolds, nothing had moved on. Each morning, he woke up to the same reality. A man who had shown the world the worst version of himself. He hadn't touched alcohol since that night. He'd started seeing a therapist twice a week, and he'd spent long hours on the phone with Lily, trying to explain what he couldn't understand himself, how he could have become the person in that video. "I need to apologize to him," Peter told Lily during one call, not just for that night, for not recognizing him, for not thanking him properly for saving your life. "He might not want to see you, Dad," Lily warned. Her voice was gentler now than it had been in their first devastating conversation. "I know," Peter replied, "but I have to try." On a Tuesday morning, Peter stood outside Boston General Hospital, a letter in his hand. He'd written it, thrown it away, and rewritten it 7 times. He was dressed simply, jeans and a button-down shirt, no designer labels, no expensive watch. He took a deep breath and walked inside. The receptionist looked up as he approached the desk. "Can I help you?" "I'd like to leave this for Dr. David Wilson," Peter said, his voice quiet. "It's a personal letter." The woman's eyes widened slightly with recognition. The video had been seen by millions. His face was known. "I'll make sure he gets it," she said, taking the envelope. Peter nodded his thanks and turned to leave. "He's in the cafeteria," the receptionist called after him. "If you wanted to try to catch him, his lunch break ends in 20 minutes. Peter stood frozen, surprised by the unexpected opportunity. "Thank you," he managed to say. He found Dr. Wilson sitting alone at a corner table, reading something on his tablet while eating a sandwich. The cafeteria was half full, the sound of conversations and clinking dishes filling the air. Peter approached slowly, his heart pounding. "Dr. Wilson?" Dr. Wilson looked up. The recognition was immediate, but his expression remained neutral, neither welcoming nor rejecting. "Mr. Reynolds." I was leaving a letter for you. But if you have a moment." Peter gestured to the empty chair across from him. Dr. Wilson studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Peter sat down, placing the letter on the table between them. "I'm sober," Peter said, feeling the need to establish this first. "Haven't had a drink since that night." "That's good," Dr. Wilson replied, "but I suspect alcohol wasn't the root problem." Peter nodded, looking down at his hands. "No, it just removed the filter." The thoughts were already there. He looked up, meeting Dr. Wilson's eyes directly. "I've spent these weeks thinking about why I acted that way, why I thought that way. It's not simple." "No," Dr. Wilson agreed. "It rarely is." "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," Peter continued. "I don't deserve that, and I'm not here to make myself feel better." "Then why are you here, Mr. Reynolds?" Peter took a deep breath. "To tell you that I'm trying to change, really change. Not just to avoid being caught on camera again, but because I don't want to be that person anymore." He pushed the letter forward slightly. "And to ask if there's anything I can do for the clinic. Not money, though I'd be happy to donate, but time, work, something real." Dr. Wilson picked up the letter but didn't open it. "The clinic needs all kinds of help. Paperwork, scheduling, maintenance. It's not glamorous." "I don't need glamorous," Peter said quietly. "I need to be useful." Dr. Wilson was silent for a moment, studying Peter's face as if looking for something specific. "We have volunteer orientation on Thursdays at 6 p.m. No special treatment. You'd start like anyone else." "I understand," Peter said. Dr. Wilson stood, tucking the unopened letter into his pocket. "Lily called me last week," he said. "She mentioned you've been talking a lot." Peter looked up in surprise. "She didn't tell me." "She wanted to know if I thought people could really change." Dr. Wilson gathered his things, his lunch break clearly ending. "Do you know what I told her?" Peter shook his head. "I told her that in my experience as a doctor, people can heal from almost anything. But it takes time, it often hurts, and you have to do the work every day." He offered a small nod. "Thursday at 6, Mr. Reynolds, if you're serious."